imagine spending 30 years chasing one number. Not a promotion, not a bigger house, not a dream car, just one number, $1 million. You tell yourself that once you get there, everything changes. Money won't keep you awake at night. Bills won't feel stressful anymore. You'll finally be able to breathe. Then, one random Tuesday afternoon, you're sitting at your kitchen table, refreshing your investment account like you've done thousands of times before. The number appears, $1,021. You stare at it for a few seconds. You smile, close the app, then your spouse asks if you remembered to take the trash out. That's it. 30 years of work. And the biggest financial milestone of your life feels exactly like every other Tuesday. Hi, I'm Alex, and today we're talking about why becoming a millionaire doesn't actually feel like becoming a millionaire anymore. Because somewhere along the way, the meaning of that word quietly changed, and most people never noticed. For decades, millionaire was the ultimate finish line. Movies made millionaires look like celebrities. TV commercials showed mansions, yachts, private jets, and people who never looked at price tags. If someone had $1 million, they were rich. End of story. But here's the problem. That image stayed exactly the same, while the economy completely changed underneath it. Inflation doesn't make headlines every day, but it quietly changes everything. Every year, your money buys a little less. Every year, prices move a little higher. And after decades, those tiny changes become enormous. $1 million today simply doesn't have the same purchasing power it had 20 or 30 years ago. The title stayed the same, the value didn't. That's why something interesting happens whenever researchers ask Americans one simple question. What does it take to be wealthy? Very few people actually answer. $1 million. Most people say somewhere between 2 and 3 million. Think about that for a second. The finish line moved without anyone officially announcing it. People are still celebrating the old milestone while quietly admitting it doesn't actually represent wealth anymore. Now, before someone says I'm claiming $1 million isn't impressive, it absolutely is. Reaching a 7-figure net worth puts you far ahead of the average household. Most people will never get there. But being impressive and feeling rich are two completely different things. Let's say you retire with exactly $1 million invested. Sounds incredible. Until you actually ask one simple question. How much income does that $1 million create? Using one of the most common retirement guidelines, your portfolio might safely produce around $40,000 per year. $40,000. After spending decades building $1 million portfolio, the income it generates looks surprisingly ordinary. You're probably not flying first class. You're probably still budgeting vacations. You're definitely still paying attention to grocery prices. The $1 million dream suddenly starts looking less like luxury and more like stability. And honestly, stability isn't a bad thing. It's just not the fantasy most people imagined. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Most millionaires don't actually have $1 million sitting in a checking account. Their wealth exists mostly on paper. It's inside retirement accounts, investment portfolios, home equity. In other words, they're asset rich, not cash rich. Someone can technically be a millionaire while still thinking twice before replacing their roof, because selling investments has tax consequences. Selling the house means finding somewhere else to live. And retirement accounts aren't giant piggy banks you casually empty whenever you feel like it. That's why so many millionaires still drive older cars, still shop sales, still compare prices. Not because they're pretending to be frugal, because they understand something most people don't. Net worth and spending money are completely different things. Then comes another surprise almost nobody plans for. Retirement isn't cheap. Healthcare gets more expensive. Insurance gets more expensive. Home maintenance never magically disappears. If anything, those expenses usually increase as you get older. Which means that $1 million you've spent decades building already has a list of future bills waiting for it. Now, let's talk about something that completely changed the way I think about wealth. Researchers have spent years studying everyday millionaires. And the results are almost boring. They're not celebrities, they're not crypto geniuses, they're not lottery winners. Most are teachers, engineers, managers, small business owners, people with completely ordinary careers. The difference wasn't extraordinary income, it was extraordinary consistency. They invested every month, ignored market panic, kept buying during recessions, and repeated that process for 20 or 30 years. That's it. No secret investment, no magic formula, just patience. Which is funny, because patience is probably the least exciting financial strategy ever created. Nobody posts on social media about contributing to an index fund for the 347th month in a row. Nobody celebrates skipping another unnecessary purchase. But that's exactly what creates wealth. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. Meanwhile, the people who look rich often aren't. The newest luxury SUV, designer clothes, massive mortgage, boat sitting in the driveway. Sometimes those things represent wealth, sometimes they represent debt. Because looking wealthy has become surprisingly easy. Actually becoming wealthy takes decades. And that's a difference almost nobody sees from the outside. But there's one final reason becoming a millionaire feels strangely disappointing. Human beings are incredibly good at moving the goalposts. When you make $50,000, you think 100,000 will solve everything. Then you reach 100,000, and suddenly people making 200,000 become your comparison. The same thing happens with wealth. 1 million becomes 2, 2 becomes 5, 5 becomes 10. Your lifestyle adjusts, your expectations adjust, and eventually, your definition of enough quietly disappears. That's why so many millionaires don't actually consider themselves wealthy. Not because they're lying, because they've adapted to the number. It became normal. The excitement faded, and their brain immediately started chasing the next milestone. Money solves financial problems. It doesn't automatically create satisfaction. Those are two completely different things. Maybe that's the biggest lesson here. The goal was never really becoming a millionaire. The goal was buying freedom. Freedom from constant financial stress. Freedom to retire. Freedom to say no to work you hate. Freedom to handle emergencies without panic. That's what $1 million actually buys for most people. Not a mansion, not a private jet, just something far more valuable. Peace of mind. And maybe that's why the moment feels so ordinary. Because real financial success rarely arrives with fireworks. It arrives quietly, looking almost exactly like every other Tuesday. The only difference is that you no longer have to wonder if you're going to be okay. And honestly, that might be worth more than feeling rich ever was.